Brawling with foreigners?
Our greatest fear tapped his pencil on his desk, surely thinking of something horrendous that he would force upon all of us. It was not as though we were not deserving of punishment. Looking back, the Kempe was correct. We were not better than swine, not better than bandits, to do what we did. Konoe guards don't behave like drunken fools. Rikers don't smash bottles over other men's heads.
Did they kill any of them?
The barkeep indicated that their victims all survived and returned to their vessel after providing the payment he requested. The one that had a serving tray cracked over him required some treatment, but refused transport to our own medical facility.
The hour was late, and I could feel the lingering effects of the drink still within me. I didn't begin to feel the spinning that came before vomiting, but it was a struggle to remain upright after the blow to my head. The tapping of the sergeant's pencil against his desk continued with a rapid rhythm. Ishimura rose from his seat, still garbed in his evening wear, and paced us like a tiger viewing its prey. Then he pounced.
When you shame yourself by engaging in activities that are not befitting the station of an Imperial Guard, that shame extends not just to you, but to your brothers in arms. When you shame your brothers in arms by failing to stop them from bashing unsuspecting foreigners over the head with dinnerware, that shame extends to the entire battalion.
Yes, sir.
You have not been given permission to speak.
The strike of Ishimura's cane into Hadashi's gut was almost instantaneous, and Hadashi fell to the floor, kneeling, and holding himself up with his hands. A retching and heaving came out of him, just like the gaijin back in the tavern. Even that old Kempe looked fearful.
What fools you have been. Not a half a month away from walking out of here as men I would be proud to call my brothers in arms, and you go forth into the capital and commit a crime. For what?
Silence answered him.
Tell me why you did this, or I'll put you all to digging latrines for the next year. Speak.
The outsiders dishonored the barkeep. They showed no shame, and insulted our people with their rude gestures.
Gestures? Did they bring harm to the barkeep? Did they assault him? Did they harm you?
Hadashi recovered himself, and turned his face upwards to give reply to Ishimura-sama.
They provoked us.
By doing what?
Their leader. He stared at us as if we were nothing. They showed no discipline, no respect.
That is their burden to overcome. It is not for you to mete out correction to foreigners.
With a quick wave of his hand, the sergeant had Hakamori and the Rikus removed, and dismissed the artillerymen. I was sure they would now face their own commanders for their own gauntlet. Now that it was down to just the two of us, I suspected that the true punishment he envisioned would be applied. He sat himself back down, the chair creaking under his bulk. He tapped his pencil once again, refusing to even look upon us. After what felt like forever, he looked up and spoke to us without his sergeant's tone. He looked toward Hadashi, who by this time now stood once again at a proper attention.
Do you understand that you could have killed a man by striking him in the head, as you did? We do not live in the lands of our fathers and grandfathers. This is a new age. These foreigners are not shunned and localized as it was before. They have papers that note the fates of their men when they come to this country. Had you killed one of them, the consequences of your foolishness might echo throughout the world. I would have taken my tonto to hand.
Neither of us responded. We had no excuse.
I have never had cadets who would otherwise be shining stars in our battalion throw away their potential in this way, and I am struggling to determine what fate should befall you.
For the last year we sacrificed blood and sweat to become Konoe. The endless drill, the live fire exercises, the rousing at dawn and the rest at dusk, courses in mathematics, cartography, gunnery, Western etiquette, history, navigation on land and sea, survival and marksmanship, all for Hadashi's impulsiveness to hurl it into the sewer. I didn't blame him. Were I not more cowardly than him, I would have done the same thing that he did to bring us to this sad state. I stepped forward. Ishimura-sama, I volunteer for expulsion from the Nichidai. I have brought shame to this battalion, and if my name is struck from the Konoe rolls, the shame will also be struck. The both of them looked up at me, one farther than the other, like I had lost my mind. Hadashi corrected his gaze back to forwards and upwards, as we had all been taught, but I could feel the sergeant's eyes fixating on me. His pencil tapping resumed. I was ready for him to agree to those terms. I was ready to face my parents with my shame. I was ready to go back to the farm and tend to the fields just as when I was a boy.
No. I have a better idea.
My eyes widened. Was I to be whipped instead? Would I suffer a demotion?
The two of you enjoy rolling around with the foreigners. We have a guest joining us in 2 days. An advisor from Europe. The two of you will be detached from this battalion and join the unit that is to receive instruction from him. You will follow his instructions and formulate a training program from the advice that he gives.
I would not be opposed to this, but I know Hadashi would not approve. But what was the alternative?
I will not take your shoulder boards. You will still represent the Guard. If you fail in this task, or disgrace yourselves before the foreigner as you have done today, then I will expel the both of you from this academy. Is this understood?
I hadn't the time to process this new command, but I gave the only response that I could, and my comrade did the same. Yes, sir.
You will retrieve your baggage from your racks and meet the Kempe for escort to the docks at dawn tomorrow. Now, get out of my sight.
Hadashi and I quickly stepped out from the sergeant's gaze. Of all the potential outcomes, this was the last on the list of possibilities. We passed through the door, back into that stone plaza where we had become soldiers, and slowed our pace. It was fitting, I suppose, to sentence us to serve under an outsider. This was not an unknown thing, for a European to come and teach, for a brief period, but that sort of thing was for the officers, rather than the enlisted men. I heard a sniffle come out of my friend. The spectacles that he bore did nothing to disguise his tears.
Nakamura,
What?
I am sorry that you must share this punishment with me. My impulsiveness has dragged you and I into the same sewage pit.
I considered his words as we walked back towards the barracks. Think about it. It isn't much of a punishment. Training this way is usually reserved for the future commanders. It might be more a privilege than a curse. He considered my words as we neared the door.
Almost a promotion, then.
Almost. That doesn't mean you should go and try and smash the next gaijin you see over the head in an effort to make sergeant. We passed through the doors, the moonlight affording us a last look at one another, before this upheaval would take place. I looked towards Hadashi, and I could see his tears gave way to a slight smile. We spent the next day sitting out from the drill, which I admit was a relief. Instead, we took to packing our things. Some eyebrows raised on the faces of the others in our dormitory, but not one of them made a comment. It wouldn't have been needed. Sure enough, someone would get wind of what had happened, and like gossiping courtesans, the news would circulate. It seemed unnecessary to acknowledge it. At the next dawn, we moved out. Thankfully, none of our buddies were available to view us hefting our kit into the ox cart that the Kempe drove out to the drill square. They had been sent after Reveille to the washrooms for ablutions. The yellow sun had begun to breach the horizon when we finally set off. It wasn't terribly far to the docks from the academy, but with our trunks and effects, it would have been an awful walk. The oxen gave a hearty puff, when the Kempe and driver both gave them a whack with the switch, and we began to roll off the hill and past the gates. Do you think they'll be like the others?
Which others?
You know.
I doubt it. They must be from their ground forces, otherwise the Marines would be sent in our place, and we might have suffered a different fate. Those ones the other night were sailors.
We rumbled along, the wooden wheels of the cart and the hooves of the oxen thumping along the roadway. Ishimura didn't say what unit we were joining.
Men from the army, probably. Artillery guys would be my guess. The Gaijin love their cannon.
Well, that could be fun.
You want to throw around 20-kilogram shells all day and night?
No, but you've got to admit that they have a safer job than the rest of us.
Until the enemy cannon starts shooting back.
I suspect it'll be boring. The punishment is the lack of excitement.
You two bicker like old women. Let me watch the sun rise in peace, please.
The Kempe, who not 2 days ago had nearly shot Hadashi through the head, interrupted our guesswork. He and I looked at each other and decided to remain quiet. The sun's red light now perforated the light cloud cover in the distance, and a calm came over us. I took a moment to take accounting and make sure that we recovered everything from the barracks. I wouldn't open my trunk while we were moving, but I needed to at least ensure my papers were in order. I recommended Hadashi do the same while we had the time. If the commanding officer of our new unit was as much of a bastard as Ishimura, it would serve us better to be prepared. When we arrived, Hadashi and I shared a look of disappointment. An engineering platoon. Looking back, it could have been worse. The waves that crested out into the bay were pretty enough. On a good day, you could see them from the windows in the dormitories. The unit that we were meant to join up with looked less impressive than we had hoped. Engineers can be good fellows, but they're a little detached from reality. Their purpose is important, but they weren't a glorious outfit. Bridge builders and bricklayers in uniform. Hadashi leaned into me and said what we were both thinking.
It might have been better to take the whipping. They're a bit raggedy.
He was only slightly wrong. These guys are more thinkers than fighters. The 50 or so, judging by the depth of the formation, had taken to a parade rest on the dock. I wasn't sure where their commander, our commander I should say, was located around them. Many of them wore the same spectacles that Hadashi did, so I'm sure he felt some kind of commonality with them. As if that would soothe the wound to his honor that this posting had caused, the old Kempe brought us to a stop and wished us well as we dismounted the cart. I elected to have my friend step down first, and I lowered our trunks down to him, and then stepped off myself. By the time we had done so, and turned to thank him, he was already underway. We weren't sure what to do at this point. It would be improper to simply shout for the commander to appear, and given that we were meant to receive a foreign advisor, the pressure was on to find him quickly. We decided to leave the trunks where they were, and go searching for him. Despite my gratitude to our former sergeant for not discharging us dishonorably, he didn't provide much in the way of guidance to this new posting. As these were men, and not mollusks, their barracks couldn't have been here, and it would be a disgrace to not have their leader present to receive a dignitary. We walked past 50 pairs of eyes that followed us down the promenade, all of them without a word. At least not a word that we could hear. Thankfully, while we were searching for him, he was searching for us.
Private Nakamura and Private Hadashi. To the rear of the block, if you please.
He had a strange voice. Must have been older than us by far. We passed through the block and found him. It was hard to keep from smiling. He looked pretty grandfatherly, greying all around, and the stoop and spectacles completed the picture. The black uniform tunic and gold braids and epaulets looked a bit flashy for a man of his bearing. He seemed almost pleased to see us. In contrast to Ishimura's barbs, there was a palpable sense that the old man would have a hard time enforcing discipline, but how often could a group of uniformed bridge builders get into trouble? We approached and gave the proper bow that his age and rank merited. By the time we unbent ourselves, he had already come near enough to extend a hand forward to shake.
Major Nobusuke of the Marui Engineering Corps. A pleasure, young fellows.
We returned his shake and were perplexed by his eager demeanor. Must have been excited to receive his gaijin guest.
I received the runner from the Nichidai yesterday evening. It's an honor for our unit to receive attachment from the Konoe.
Hadashi and I briefly looked at one another, and we didn't have the heart to tell him that this was a punitive assignment. I repaid his kind words. It is you that honors us, Nobusuke-sama. We will serve this platoon with distinction.
Indeed. We're waiting for the regimental band to turn up. It should be another hour or so of waiting, so it might be good to have you set your effects into the carriages just there behind the block.
Permission to speak, sir?
Granted.
We weren't told very much as to the Gaia European that we are expecting.
A unit from what the Minrin call the moral country, from the center of Europe. They have some technology that they'd like to introduce to us. By our information, they've been below before.
Hadashi and I raised an eyebrow at one another. Impressive. You read in the papers all about the underworld. The Gaijin have built whole cities down there. The stories you'd read about all seemed like nonsense, so Hadashi and I shared a grin as we contemplated what we might learn. Perhaps this posting wouldn't be so bad after all. Then, music was heard. Not really music, but several trumpets and drums that all seemed awfully out of tune. From further back, towards the slope of the hill, several men in our uniforms emerged from one of the warehouses near the docks and began making their way towards us.
Excellent. That's them now. The two of you can stand by me while we wait.
Another honor, to accompany our new commander. I shared a word with Hadashi while the band continued on their route towards the front of the block. I spoke first. We ought to look presentable. I feel bad for the commander. At his age, he should have taken a pension.
He's all right, but we haven't angered him yet. He might be just as hard of a bastard as Ishimura.
He looks like a merchant, not a guard officer. I don't know if he knows how to be a hard bastard. In the middle of getting to grips with our new posting, we didn't have a moment to notice a ship drawing nearer to the docks. A big ugly thing. 3 smokestacks along its spine. I looked for the ensign but didn't recognize it. White, red and black horizontal tricolour. I knew the red, white and blue vertical tricolour. And that awful series of crossbars and triangles in the same colours. And the stars and stripes, of course. But this one was new. The horn of the ship sounded out low as it approached, and the black pillars of smog that flew out its top end started to disappear. Hadashi and I quickly took to the flanks of Nobusuke-sama and stood to attention. The rest of the engineers in the block tried their best, but I knew that we had a better posture and stance. The regimental band took up positions in line on our left and hefted their instruments, despite the cold air sticking their lips to their mouthpieces. Our new grandfather then addressed the band and paced the length of the block, checking for sleepyheads.
Wait for them to start coming down the gangway, then start. Tanaka, Ito, puff out your chests, you little girls.
A great girding of metal echoed out over the docks as the ship that carried out guests stopped and weighed anchor. One could see their sailors shuffling about the deck over the top of the rail, but from this distance, I couldn't start making out any faces. I snuck a glance at Hadashi, who maintained a proper stance, but his eyes indicated a quiet boredom. Despite our formation's name, the Guard, we weren't often tasked with guarding much of anything. Everything that we had been taught told us that we are the edge of the blade. It felt as though babysitting some foreigners was like us being sat in the scabbard. Remember Ishimura's words. Don't shame yourself again. Don't let Hadashi shame himself again. Here they come. Himagayo was played as the gangway dropped, and our gaijin made themselves seen. I didn't catch a derisive look from Hadashi, so they must be sufficiently impressive for him. I was tempted to agree. Their sailors stayed aboard, and down the gangway came a column of them, in formation, a bit tighter than our own block. The leading man wore a white uniform, and the rest of them wore a sad grey. Some were about my height, some taller. Typical Gaijin features, weird spiked helmets embellished with gold. Are they all that wealthy that they can strap their soldiers down with that precious metal? When they came down to our level, their block shifted to the left and turned to face us. Nobusuke-sama left our company and moved forward to greet their man. At a quick march, Hadashi and I followed him and came face to face with the outsiders. Their leader was a smaller guy, a bit taller than me, but not by much. There were men in the block behind us who were taller. Our anthem finally started to quiet down, and the clicking of heels against the stone on the docks as their formation came to a stop finally could be heard. For strangers, they seemed unremarkable. Brown hair and those green round eyes could not have been nearly as old as our new commander, but telling age with the Europeans is always difficult. One their own, a smaller man, wearing the spectacles just like Hadashi, came out from behind his leader's white uniform and gave a surprisingly appropriate bow to the major. Then, lifting himself from his bend, he spoke in our language. He butchered it a bit, but I could understand him.
Honours and greetings from the Boulder Machine Strider Brigade and the Deutsche Emperor.
I think he said that last part backwards, but it didn't keep us from taking his meaning. The weight of his age seemed to drop away from the major, given his excited expression. Our grandfather returned his greetings and respect, and met the hand that stretched out from the Gaijin leader. Their leader said something in their language, which their bespectacled translator relayed in short order.
Oberleutnant Feldmeier extends his thanks for a welcome very warm.
I saw Hadashi crack a smile at the shortcomings of the foreigner's grammar, but it was better than him flying off the handle in anger at hearing our language being abused in such a way.
Major General Nobusuke, of the Marui Engineers, thank you for journeying so far. I hope it was an uneventful trip.
This poor messenger would have his tongue tied in this relay eventually.
Journey went well. No troubles. Our passengers are in good condition.
Excellent. Can we help with the unloading?
Thank you, no. We can get them moving soon enough.
Passengers. Did they bring a whole division aboard?
May we see them?
The Major would like to observe the striding.
Very much, thank you.
For the safety of your men, they might move back a bit.
Nobusuke turned to us and started throwing up his hands and shouting, in an effort to have the men in our block move away. The Gaijin also broke formation and went straight back up the gangway and on board their ship. Hadashi turned to me as we walked back towards the hill. They weren't here for very long. Seemed more polite than the others.
I don't think they're going all the way back home just after saying hello.
The foreigners boarded, and their vessel's bell started to ring out. From the front of the craft, below the railing and extending into the inner decks, we heard a gassy hissing as a portion of the hull opened up and lowered itself down to form a ramp of steel. Beneath the ramp, posts extended to lay into the stone surface of the dockyard. I couldn't see anything inside, but this was a novel thing to watch. Their engineering is more advanced than our own, but it would only be a matter of time before we caught on to all their little inventions. What I would see next made me doubt that. An awful cranking now roared out from the opening in their ship. Are they going to ground their vessel? Is that their engine turning over?
It doesn't roar like a steam furnace. The pitch is wrong. This is something different.
A puddle that has accumulated in the cracked stone surface of the dockyard pulsed as a tremendous metallic pounding now heralded their entrance. Great steel men now walked down the ramp. The supports that extended from the ramp creaked and groaned under the weight of the Gaijin's monsters. I heard someone drop their rifle behind me, and a gasp came from Hadashi. I didn't even feel my mouth fall open. The ground beneath us quaked as they strode out. Pistons and clockworks clanking and spinning as one leg lifted and another set down, propelling these iron demons forward and out of their vessel. I don't have the words for them. Legs like a man, a stout torso out of which one of their cannons extended, and two arms, almost like an ape, each ending in a crab's claw of solid steel. Just as the first one entered our view, another emerged. They screamed as they walked, a high whine above a low growl, and all the time clanking and whirring. A few of the men near me had to stuff their gloved fingers in their ears to keep from becoming deaf. It was only minutes before all five of them came to rest on the stones of the dock, and from the right, the awful sounds they made started to die out. Once I got a grip on what I had just seen, I looked towards Nobusuke, who looked as though he had witnessed the birth of one of his children. Just joy and adoration on his face, and a gratuitous smile that I had never seen on one of our officers. In turn, as the noise ended, each of the machines took to a low crouch, and their hulls scraped against the rough surface beneath. Once quiet harmony came back to us. The demon closest to us opened up its top bulkhead, and the spiked helm and white uniform of their lead man emerged. Still trying to wrap my head around it, I looked for opinions from the others. I turned to Hadashi, whose habit of staring at Gaijin was finally justified. You still think this will be a boring post? He didn't respond, and just continued to stare. In unison, the men within the monsters were revealed, as the same kind of hiss that started their march brought it to an end. Valve handles that spun and lifted, to give them access to the iron ladders that were carved into the sides of the hull, allowed them to step out and onto the dock as easily as a cavalryman would dismount his horse. Our old man now ran, or shuffled really quickly, down off the hill to take in the view of the strange machines. We were supposed to stand next to him, and somehow in the mess of all this, we managed to get halfway up the slope, so I grabbed Hadashi by the arm and insisted that we go down and act as Kano should. He agreed, and we quickly caught up with Nobusuke-sama. He huffed and puffed as we approached, but we could still catch wind of his words.
Amazing. Don't you think, young man? What a privilege to see what modern science can produce.
Yes, sir. They certainly are a wonder. Our little trio now stood before the machines, and the foreigner and his translator. They had a bit of a smirk, and the wide-eyed grin that our commander featured must have caused them some joy. Nobusuke ran his hand over the metallic leg of the machine, the intricate clockwork that ran the length, and turned to Hadashi and I, a spark in his eyes that shined like an evening star.
We have so much to learn.